Hello everyone and welcome to my Soap Twist 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Poppy Nozawa sat in her small apartment in downtown Los Angeles, where the sun always seemed to shine a bit too brightly for the shadows it formed. Her fingers nervously twisted the hem of her cardigan. The room was packed with fabric swatches, sewing patterns, and half-finished designs, leftovers of a creatively ambitious existence. Those dreams seemed distant now, overwhelmed by a frantic scheme that dominated her every waking thought. Across from her sat Sheila Carter, her unusual ally, whose sharp eyes and calculated sneer contrasted with Poppy's apprehensive demeanor. The air was thick with tension, the kind that arises when two people disclose a secret that has the potential to save or destroy them. The plan was simple yet audacious. Get Luna Nozawa, Poppy's daughter, out of jail. Luna, with her wide-eyed optimism and fierce commitment, had been caught up in a web of deception and betrayal, framed for a crime she had not committed. The circumstances surrounding her detention were opaque, a convoluted web of corporate espionage and personal vendettas at Forrester Creations, the fashion giant where Luna had worked as an intern. A stolen design, a forged email trail, and a strategically positioned witness had landed her in jail, her future unraveling quicker than a carelessly patched seam. Poppy's heart ached at the sight of her daughter in a cold, gray cell, and her soul was dulled by the weight of injustice. Sheila, ever the opportunist, approached Poppy few weeks previously with a proposal. "I know people," she replied, her tone low and secretive. "People who can get things done. But it will cost you." Poppy had hesitated, knowing Sheila's reputation as a great manipulator, a woman whose alliances were both brief and dangerous. But desperation tends to cloud moral lines, and Poppy had agreed to the collaboration. They were now deep into the planning phase, devising a strategy based on equal parts cleverness and danger. The initial phase involved acquiring information. Sheila's connections were deep, running through the underbelly of Los Angeles like the roots of an ancient tree. She'd previously scheduled a meeting with a dodgy lawyer named Victor, who claimed he could persuade the appropriate authorities to look the other way. Poppy didn't ask how, and Sheila didn't elaborate. Instead, they concentrated on the logistics, forged paperwork, a possible alibi, and a large sum of money to grease the gears. Poppy had depleted her savings by selling her late mother's jewelry and took out a loan she could not afford to repay. Every cent was a wager on Luna's freedom, a risk that kept Poppy up at night, her thoughts racing with worst-case scenarios. As the days passed into weeks, the plan began to take form. Sheila's confidence was unshakable, and every action she made was planned to take advantage of system faults. She discovered a bribe-taking jail guard named Eddie, who had a gambling debt and a thirst for quick cash. Poppy despised the idea of bribing anyone. It felt like she was lowering herself to the level of people who had framed Luna, but she ignored her remorse. She'd do anything for her daughter, including uniting with someone like Sheila. But the deeper they went, the more Poppy felt the consequences of their deeds. She wasn't naive. She understood Sheila's motivations were never really altruistic. Sheila had her own plan, which most likely included using Luna's release as leverage in a wider scheme within Forrester Creations. Poppy had overheard murmurs about Sheila's past, her manipulations, betrayals, and the lives she had upended without thinking twice. However, Poppy had no choice but to trust her. Without Sheila's assistance, Luna would remain imprisoned, her youth rotting away in a cell while the true perpetrators went free. The emotional toll was unrelenting. Poppy's days were a whirl of restless nights and frantic phone calls, with her heart split between hope and fear. She paid Luna visits whenever she could, sitting across from her in the sterile visiting room, separated by a chasm-like glass window. Luna's eyes, once brilliant with ambition to become a designer, were now clouded by fear. "I didn't do it, Mom," she'd say quietly, her voice quivering. "I know, baby," Poppy would say, attempting a smile as her chest clenched. Each visit weakened her resolve, making her more determined to see their plan through, no matter the cost. In contrast, Sheila flourished in the pandemonium. She went around the world like a predator, with every word and action intended to bend others to her will. Poppy envied her detachment, her ability to separate the moral rot of their deeds. But jealousy was a brief feeling, quickly replaced by anxiety. Sheila's plans were always multifaceted, with each step resembling a move in a chess game Poppy couldn't entirely comprehend. What would Sheila require in exchange for her assistance? Will Luna's liberation come at the cost of another betrayal? These questions tormented Poppy, but she brushed them aside in favor of her immediate goal, getting her daughter out. The plan's final component posed a potential distraction. Sheila advocated arranging a little controversy at Forrester Creations, involving leaked designs, to draw attention away from the jail. It would offer them a window to carry out Luna's release, whether through a falsified transfer order or a well-timed escape. Poppy resisted the idea of causing additional harm, but Sheila insisted. "Do you want Luna out?" she said with a harsh tone. "Then stop clutching your pearls and let me handle it." Poppy yielded, her stomach churning from guilt. She told herself it was for Luna, that the ends justified the means, but the lie rang hollow. Poppy's nerves frayed as the planned date approached. She ate little, her appetite replaced by a persistent knot of tension. She had resorted to pacing her flat, her footsteps leaving a trail in the tattered carpet. Sheila, noticing her uncertainty, grew more assertive, her patience growing thin. "You're either in or out, Poppy," she'd said during a heated meeting. "If you back out now, Luna will remain in jail, and you will have only yourself to blame." The words hurt deep, fueling Poppy's determination but also deepening her skepticism. The night before the plan was to be carried out, Poppy sat alone in her apartment, glancing at a photo of Luna from happier times. It was taken at a fashion show, with Luna beaming in a gown she had made herself, her future extending out like a runway. Tears obscured Poppy's eyesight as she touched her daughter's face with her fingertip. The prospect of failing her was heartbreaking, as was the thought of what she would become as a result. She had crossed borders she never imagined she would, siding with a woman whose morals were as flexible as water. Yet, Luna would cross 1,000 more. When the day arrived, things moved at breakneck pace. Sheila's distraction went down without a hitch. A leaked email chain incriminating a competitor designer sparked commotion at Forrester Creations, attracting media interest and tying up the legal team. Eddie, the jail guard, played his role by accepting the money and turning a blind eye when Luna was released under the premise of a medical transfer. Poppy waited in an inconspicuous van a block away, her heart hammering as she scoured the street for any sign of danger. When Luna eventually emerged, pallid and trembling but free, Poppy's relief was so intense that she nearly fell. The reunion was bittersweet. Luna clung to her mother, tears flowing down her cheeks, but her elation was tempered by the realization that they weren't out of danger. They had to disappear, at least temporarily, until the heat subsided. Sheila had set up bogus IDs and a safe house in Nevada, but Poppy knew better than to trust her totally. As they drove into the night, Luna dozing in the passenger seat, Poppy's mind raced with questions. What did Sheila gain from this? What conditions were imposed on their freedom? And how could they possibly reconstruct their lives after this? The road stretched out before them, dark and unpredictable, just like the future. Poppy caught a glimpse of Luna, her daughter sleeping peacefully, and felt a glimmer of optimism. They'd made it this far despite all odds. But the cost was high, and the scars would last. Poppy had given up her ideals for her daughter's freedom, and while she'd do it again in a heartbeat, she couldn't escape the sensation that Sheila's shadow would follow them, a reminder that no strategy, no matter how audacious, is without a cost. The following weeks were a whirl of hiding and planning. The safe house was a dilapidated cabin in the Nevada desert, its walls tattered with age and neglect. Poppy and Luna maintained a low profile and avoided contact with the outer world. Luna, still traumatized by her time in jail, struggled to adjust. She'd wake up at night, gasping from nightmares, her faith in the world broken. Poppy tried her best to console her, but her own guilt was a heavy load. She had saved her kid, but what was the cost to her soul? Sheila's disappearance brought both relief and concern. She'd fled after the escape, leaving only a burner phone and a cryptic note. "You owe me." Poppy feared the day that debt would be due. She knew Sheila well enough to realize that her assistance was never free and that every favor was a transaction waiting to be redeemed. The notion kept Poppy on edge, her eyes monitoring the horizon for any indication of danger. Luna continued to heal over the months, and her spirit gradually returned. She began sketching again, her pencils scratching out images that expressed endurance and hope. Poppy watched her daughter with mixed feelings of pride and sadness, knowing that their lives would never be the same. They couldn't return to Los Angeles without risking being recognized. The fashion industry, once a common ambition, was now a distant memory marred by betrayal and corruption. Poppy, too, attempted to rebuild. She started on small jobs under her new name, such as making modifications for locals and teaching Luna the skills her mother had given down. But the excitement she had previously had in creating had vanished, replaced with a somber pragmatism. She'd done what she needed to do, and while she didn't regret it, she couldn't shake the emptiness it left behind. Luna turned to her mother one evening as the sun fell below the desert horizon, her eyes clearer than they had been in months. "Are we going to be okay?" she inquired, her tone quiet but steady. Poppy hesitated, then nodded and drew her daughter into an embrace. "Yeah, baby," she whispered. "We'll be fine," Poppy murmured, but she could feel the weight of uncertainty in her words. Sheila was out there, somewhere, and her ideas were blossoming like a spider web. The world they'd left behind was still whirling, with secrets and plans ready to entice them back in. For the time being, they had each other, and that was enough to propel them on one cautious step at a moment, into a future they'd have to build from scratch. Luna felt the cold steel of the cell door close behind her, and the world reduced to scraping concrete walls and the hollow hum of fluorescent lighting. She used to assume she was the ruler of her fate, so brilliant and in charge. But now, she was locked inside, overcome with sorrow and fear. Sheila was the first one to visit her. Her voice was cold and nasty, with scarcely a trace of warmth. "You're back where you belong," she whispered quietly, but the words sting. Luna attempted to face her mother in the eyes, but the shadows under Sheila's gaze were impenetrable. Sheila gave a quick nod. There was no comfort, only the awareness that Luna had chosen this route for herself. Poppy arrived later, leaning across the small metal table between them. Her face, illuminated by the dim overhead bulb, exhibited an odd blend of pride and disgust. "Well played," she murmured slowly and softly. "You got knocked up by a billionaire son." The words were intended to impress Luna and acknowledge the plot Moon had devised, but they landed like stones in her chest. Luna felt hollow. Poppy raised her palm as a taunt. While the strategy had worked, the globe she'd gotten came at a much higher cost than she had anticipated. Later that day, Steffi burst into the visiting room, her face carved with rage. Luna attempted to meet her gaze, but Steffi's words stung too deep. Betrayal, damage, and consequences. Luna had dared to question the world of privilege and power, to enter a place where she did not belong, and now all the people she had harmed surrounded her like vultures. The promise of control had become shards of broken glass. And Bill had once been her hope, the dim light at the end of a long tunnel. He had saved her once when she claimed she had been beaten, and she had painted herself as the victim so well that he believed her. He arranged for her early release, giving her a second opportunity. But this time he declined. He told her that the pardon would not arrive. She had used and twisted him, and he was tired of being duped. Luna tried to be angry with him, but all she felt was disappointment, an aching emptiness at the conclusion of her plan. In her cell at night, Luna curled into herself. The pregnancy she had relied on to save her now seemed like a chain. Every day behind bars increased the risk to the child, and every second spent in the cold converted her hope into guilt. She lay awake, plagued not just by her sins, but also by the fact that she was alone. Her mother's pride had been distorted. Sheila, her ally, had come to monitor rather than rescue. The few people who formerly appeared to believe in her had left. She had exchanged authenticity for manipulation and freedom for imprisonment. She remembered how simple the plan had seemed: seduce the heir, secure the baby, and use the kid to break free from the cage she knew she'd soon find herself in. However, life has a way of teaching you the most bitter lessons. The walls around her were impenetrable, and the cold was never-ending. The guard's footsteps in the corridor resounded like thunder in her mind. Every distant clink of metal emphasized the realization she had gambled everything and was now losing. Luna's reflection in the small cell's tiny window was unrecognizable. The fire in her eyes had vanished, replaced by silent apprehension. She observed other convicts struggling with their own despair, some screaming, some mute, each shattered in their own way. Luna attempted to convince herself that she was different, that she had planned this and could strategy her way out. But the prison absorbed every idea and aspiration. It taught humility, impotence, and patience. One night, she awoke trembling. As contractions began, she felt pain throughout her body. She had considered using her pregnancy as an excuse. But now, in the midnight chill, she knew that the pregnancy had not saved her. She was still confined. And now the baby was included in the cost. She imagined the future child, rejected by his father's family, born in a jail, and nurtured by a mother who had already sacrificed love for leverage. The embarrassment pierced more deeply than the pain. Sheila paid another visit after hearing about this. She sat next Luna and held her hand, but there was no warmth. "You knew what you were doing," Sheila explained. Her voice trembled, not with emotion, but with suppressed wrath. "You wanted everything. You wanted money, power, and the child. You didn't care who was wounded." Sheila's comments rang through Luna's mind for hours. No apologies or forgiveness, just the hard facts. Poppy entered the visitor's room. She regarded Luna with weird joy. "You set the game," she informed her daughter. "You did well." She hesitated. "But Bill won't bail you out this time." The words seemed like a verdict. Luna's throat clenched. The only thing she had counted on was gone. Her scheme was unraveling. The people she relied on were backing away. She was solely responsible. Luna watched the seasons shift outside her window as the days became weeks, catching glimpses of the sky through the bars. The world went on without her. Life, love, and freedom. She missed everything with a searing ache. She missed the heat of the sun on her skin, the sound of free and unrestrained laughing, and the feeling of someone trusting her without ulterior motives. She missed who she could have been before the plans, crimes, and confinement. Luna overheard portions of discussions in the yard, including joy, freedom, weekend plans, and simple things. She envied the carefree optimism she heard in their voices. She envied others who had not sacrificed everything for ambition. She envied her former innocence. She hated herself for giving it up. Luna considered escaping in her darkest hour, not just physically, but also emotionally. What if she abandoned the game entirely? What if she stopped attempting to manipulate? What if she let the world see the broken girl beneath the red lipstick grin and gold-digging plan? But will that gain her freedom? No. It would only cause her regret. And regret was still behind prison. Sheila's visits grew less regular. Poppy's words became colder. Bill's rejection echoed silently. Luna had transformed allies into adversaries, trust into commerce, and love into leverage. She recalled the moment when she determined she would never be powerless again, when she chose to take what she believed she deserved. However, the expense had been prohibitively high. Her freedom, love, and purity were all lost in a bet she believed she might win. And suddenly the jail felt more like a punishment than an echo of her choices. The concrete walls reflected her own hardened heart. The barred window framed a sky beyond her reach. She'd wanted everything, but she only had the memory of longing and the harsh reality of losing. Finally, Luna closed her eyes, quivering with sadness. She had envisioned success, the baby, the riches, and the escape. Instead, she awoke each morning to the clink of chains, the hum of fluorescent lights, and a lack of hope. She wasn't special, She was simply a woman who had reached too far and fallen off the precipice. She stopped crying. The tears were dried long ago. All that remained was a dismal, persistent aching. She would serve her sentence. She'd carry her guilt. Every day, she wondered whether the victim was not the person she injured, but the version of herself she had abandoned.